So Rafique was raised in Africa in a family engaged in political decolonization. He's a leading scholar of Islamic intellectual and cultural history, especially of Sufi sects. However, his life's work focuses upon transforming how knowledge is viewed, learned, and shared both by social movements as well as in educational institutions. In fact, he actually, as I said earlier, defies description. Sometimes I don't think I think he's from another galaxy, pretending to be human. Um, so,
Well,
so we now enter.
as someone said, we're in the world, but we're not of the world.
Yes, that definitely describes you. So we enter the realm of Rafique for the rest of the afternoon. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, so can we start with someone saying something? The three of you, any one of the three of you, I invite you to say something. It could be just hello, or it could be a little story.
Okay, something that really struck me in
Hey, can you talk a little louder? Thanks.
Yeah,
something
much
that
better.
really struck me in the morning just from a starting of a video today. That was a video from Winona. So in the middle of a break, I did some scribbling. I think some of my colleagues here know, like recently I started like doing scribbles here and there, and so I came up from the word when Winona said about climate chaos. I drew this. So this was I'm not sure if you guys can see it.
Oh, wow.
So this was what I felt from that word. It's about
Oh,
climate.
that is so beautiful. It sort of combines kind of an intensity of pain with an intensity of green. So you seem to show hope. Is that true?
I'm not exactly sure.
So what did you feel when you did this?
I think because the video was, it says something about we are actually in a climate chaos, but all this while I've been hearing climate change, climate crisis. This is the first time I heard of climate chaos, and then it really um, resonated, especially with Winona's voice. It really brought out some meaning of that word, where they are trying to protect their land, protect the waters from the land, and then um, outsiders came and um, from imagining the word from climate chaos, it's more chaotic than most of like temperature change, um, temperature getting higher, and then I think my imagination was our earth getting burned up by something, and yeah, I think that that's how I took the word from and then made it into a drawing.
Wonderful. It's so beautiful because it somehow tells me that this is how you feel. And it's so important, in my opinion, for people to know how they feel. Because when you know how you feel, you're in touch with some sort of truth. You know what I mean? And when you are with some kind of truth, however negative it might feel, at least you are with it and you honor it and you recognize it. Many people live in a world of negation or denial or avoidance. It takes a lot of courage to feel things like what you have felt. And I want to acknowledge you for that. It's very important to me because you see, what you need to remember is that you might find it strange to hear this, but up. You understand what I mean? You are part of Earth. Every single element in your body came from Earth. You have a spirit, and this spirit is knowing and recognizing, and you are honoring that. You are the voice of Earth. Just don't forget that. Don't ever forget that. You are not a trivial person who feels something big and chaotic around you. You're an agent of your life. Do you follow?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really important for you to recognize that what you call your scribbles was a very important gesture of self-recognition. And when you recognize yourself, you are with a kind of truth. And you may not know the whole truth. It doesn't matter, but you're willing to be with the truth. Does anyone else wish to say something?
Hi, Rafique.
Hi.
Hi,
You are,
Joan.
can you remind me
It's
of your name again?
Joan here.
Joanne.
It's
Joan.
Joan, actually. Yeah. That was absolutely
Joan.
beautiful when you talked about the voice and listening to it. And I think when Noel asked me to participate in being one of your candidates or your guinea pigs, the questions that he prompted were, the first one was, what was the saddest moment in your life? And the second being, what was the happiest moment in your life? And back to kind of what you said earlier, I really resonated with that when I was going through one of my, the fondest memory I have, which was actually when I dropped out of university. At this time, I was in KL and I was pursuing computer science because it was kind of like a new technological era that was, you know, super shiny. And I was really trying to figure out like how to make it out into the world, what I want to become. So I went through a transfer program that eventually would lead me to Canada to finish. And, you know, like I learned how to code, made softwares and mini robots, all that sort of stuff. But
Wow.
yeah, but after 2.5 years, it felt like I really lost myself. Like my spirit was lost. And from the get-go, I did have an inkling that it wasn't for me, but I was adamant at that time not to listen to it, not to listen to that voice. So I didn't listen to it. I felt like I needed to prove something. So that's why I pushed on. And that just led me to a really dark path. I was pretty depressed. I had an alcohol problem and everything. I hated the city I was at. And when it was time and when it was time to start the transfer process, I just couldn't get myself to do it, you know, and get myself and you know, further be in pursuit of something I know I didn't believe in. And I was thinking that if it doesn't fulfill me now, I know it's not going to fulfill me in the future. And that was more important than proving anything to anyone. So there and then, you know, it was kind of like waking up from somewhat a zombie daze. And then I moved back home, and the connection, and what was great about that part, moving back home, was the connection just sparked, you know. It's like my roots finally met the soils it belonged to. And it's funny how I once thought that like that finding freedom meant that I had to find my way into big industries, but I think I really do believe that I am the most liberated when I returned home.
Wonderful. Wonderful. This is so important. You know, I went through a similar experience. I had done an academic degree and I wanted to be practical. So I got some advice from very senior people at the World Bank and here and there. And they said, oh, you should go into corporate finance. And I ended up in Wall Street at this very exclusive, very private bank. And, you know, I felt so miserable. I said, what am I doing making rich people richer? I don't want to do that. That's not what my life is about. And, my Marxist friends said, well, look, Rafique, you're right in the center. You're in the maw of the monster. Tell us what it's like, And to be honest, I was not happy at all. And I had a wonderful boss, and I was not very good at what I was doing. I was really not good. And when he said goodbye to me, he said, Rafique, find out what you love, and then find someone to pay you to do it. And and that was the best advice I ever took. And what I did then, I just jumped over back to university and I took a 70% pay cut. It didn't matter to me at all. I was so happy because I was doing research on people who are inventing new ways to provide low-income housing. And I met amazing people. It was such a joy. It kind of gave me hope in life. And when you do something that you love, there's something, the spirit is talking. Follow what you love. Just follow that. Doesn't matter where it takes you, whatever it costs you. When you get home, you will know it, And it's a wonderful, what you should acknowledge yourself for is courage. You showed immense courage, and keep that courage. Don't ever lose it. Never, ever be afraid.
Thank you so much.
I'm doing a lot. This is wonderful. Thank you. Who else would like to talk?
So I guess that's me, the third guinea pig.
Sorry, can you remind me of your name again?
So it's Liana.
Diana.
Yes.
And your first name is Noor, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what that means?
Yes.
Light.
Yeah, light. And Liana means soft and I forgot.
Well, I can see softness. That's very clear. You're following your name beautifully. So congratulations. You can be, I had somebody who was working for me once, and I said, you have steel hands, but your gloves are very, very soft.
Okay.
So you can have a strength, you see, and you may be soft, but there's strength. Do you see what I mean? Soft does not mean weak. Do you follow?
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, great. I'm glad you got that. Tell me more.
More about?
Anything, I don't know. Do you have a question or thought? You don't have to be, this is not what do you call it, a competition for being articulate or wise. It's simply and what you call it, an adventure in curiosity. I'm just curious, that's all.
Okay. So yeah, I'm learning about this about decolonization, and throughout my reading so far, I feel that while learning, I need to do something also. So I've been trying to grow my own food and
good
do
for you.
composting.
Do what?
But then do composting.
Oh, good for you. We do the same here.
Yeah.
Carry on.
But it's really hard to do it because I'm a new mother. I have a baby, so so I've been failing a lot lah. Yeah, and then
That's
and
good.
then
Did you see your face when you said I've been failing a lot? Did you see what face you had? You were not afraid of failure. You are not afraid of failure, are you? Are you?
I don't know.
Well, let me tell you, never be afraid of failure. Whenever something goes wrong, you are learning from it. Remember that. Life is full of unexpected things. It is pretty chaotic, but whatever comes your way can be a lesson. Just remember that when you fall flat on your face, your first question should be, what happened? How did I fall down? And how do I get up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no place for blame, either blaming others or blaming yourself. There's no place for that. It is just get up and learn, or learn and get up, whichever is more practical.
Mhm.
Carry on, carry on. You said you're failing. You feel that you failed a lot. Carry on.
Yeah, and the food that I tried to grow was it's sawi. It's a big leafy green of vegetable, but it died. It keeps on dying because I keep on forgetting to water them. But actually, well, no, that's just an excuse. It's not that I forget to water them. I'm just lazy.
But you're tied up. You've got a whole life, a little young kid, right? But you can manage. You can manage.
Yeah.
You can manage. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. You can manage.
Mm.
You'll do it. You know. Because
Yes.
you see, just remember one thing. Your intentions really matter. Your intentions will have effect. You'll find out sooner or later.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm so happy to hear from them, and I just want to say a few things. Most of life, in most of history, has been chaotic. Okay, there's nothing unusual about chaos. It is in life, you know. And I want to give you an example of 4 people in the tradition, which kind of gives an idea of what can you do when you're faced with chaos. What do you do when you don't know what's going to happen next? What do you do when you see things that make you unhappy and you want to change things? And so I'll talk a little bit about 2 characters who were in the realm of knowledge and science. And they lived one lived 1,200 years ago, and the other one lived 1,000 years ago. So what I would like to talk about is Al-Jahiz first. Al-Jahiz was a black person who became very powerful and very famous in a great period in history called the Abbasid period. And the Abbasids were a very great empire that stretched from the west of North Africa all the way to close to India. And they were headquartered at Baghdad. And Al-Jahiz was a very unusual young man. He was obviously a descendant of slaves and had every reason to be resentful of his the captivity of his ancestors. He had every reason to be annoyed, and he was also born very ugly. He was not a handsome man. He was actually so ugly, and he got a disease that got his eyes to come sticking out. But he had courage. And the courage he showed was that he called himself, by his very disability, he called himself Boggle Eyes, which is Al-Jahiz. Al-Jahiz literally means boggle eyes. Now, here's a man who could silence anyone who only looked at his disability. He said, okay, you call me boggle-eyed, I'm boggle-eyed, so what? Now, what he did was he became a very great writer. He wrote 200 books. And he basically felt he was a Muslim who was a very thoughtful, philosophical Muslim who said that Muslims are better off learning about God through nature, by asking questions about nature. He would ask questions like, why should a grasshopper be more important than an elephant? Why should a grasshopper be less important than an elephant? What's so awful about being a grasshopper? And he'd ask questions about, why does the scorpion exist? Why is there predatory behavior in nature? And he basically argued that in a world of choice, you have to learn to deal with the blows of life as well as the good things of life. And when the blows of life come, like a sting of a scorpion, you have to learn endurance. So he saw one's relationship to nature as being a very spiritual thing. And he quoted from the Quran. It's very clear in the Quran that nature is nature. God thinks through nature. And those who think will understand how God thinks through nature. And there's a wonderful little hadith about the Prophet Muhammad, that he said that when you plant a seed of an apple or a fruit, it doesn't matter what happens to the fruit. If a bird eats it or if a worm eats it, it is still sadaqah. It is a gift that you're giving back to nature by planting anything. And that attitude to nature, I think we should restore among Muslims. Islam is not just only about the law, but it is also about understanding reality. And I love, I love the wonderful clarity, of trying to grow this plant and it's not surviving because it's not watered. What I heard from you, who told me the story, Liana, right? You said,
Yeah.
I was lazy, but when you said that, you were being totally honest. Do you follow? And I could see the guilt on your face. You felt, look, you owed it to that plant. You know what I mean? That's what's important. You had that intention. It's called niyyah. It's a beautiful word in Arabic. It means intention. Yes, you had a clarity of intention, but not of action. So what? You learn, and your intention will find shape. And this is what he did in his life. He was born very, 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 very poor and very marginalized, but somebody recognized his mind, and Al-Jahiz became a teacher, and he wrote 200 books, and his greatest work was about living things. He was just fascinated by life. And what I'm trying to get at in his life was that he felt that you make your way through the chaos of life, with curiosity. Your curiosity will guide you, whether you're curious about whether you failed to water the plant, or whether it's curiosity about anything in nature. And he just said, open your eyes, look carefully, reflect on what you see, then go back and look again, and then reflect on what you see this time. So he argued very clearly for a kind of what I call a process by which you interact with nature by just observing and learning, and then getting back and reflecting, and then observing even more, because your reflection allows you to ask more questions. And he was that kind of person. He didn't like to tell you what to do. He didn't like to tell you what is the truth. He'd keep on asking questions. And he was a great inspiration to many people, especially young people. And he enjoyed discussing things with them and so on and so forth. What I'm saying is that despite your feeling colonized, despite your feeling marginalized, despite your feeling that you're struggling in the middle of, your issues, what is important is that you have a certain innocence, an innocence about knowledge, innocence about yourself, no castigation, just investigation, no bitterness, just love, and no regret, just learning. We've learned from every single mistake we've made in life, and we still will make more, and we still will learn. And that is how he felt. And he had a very unusual life, because at the age of 85, after having written almost 200 books, he suffered a terrible stroke. So he lost the use of half his body. And he asked God, why did you keep my mind so clear when my body is such a mess? Why didn't you finish me off? And the answer came, he had to finish this huge book about life. And he got help and he finished it. And the strange thing about his death was that he was killed by his own books at the age of 92, because there was a problem with the earth and there was a tremor and his books fell on him and killed him. But in a way, there's something beautiful about being killed by the things you loved most in life. And as you know, it was very quick. So any old person will tell you, I'd rather die quickly than slowly. But he left a wonderful legacy. Several of his books survived. Although Baghdad was burnt and destroyed, his books survived, and his memory, unfortunately, is not well known. So what I want to do is write a novel. I'm almost finished the novel about his life and the kind of people he lived with, the people who influenced him and whom he influenced. The other person I want to talk about is al-Biruni, and he lived about 150 years after Al-Jaiz. So Al-Jaiz lived in the 9th century. So it's the years he died in 890, near the end of that century. Whereas al-Biruni lived in the 10th century. And he was from, not from Baghdad, but from Central Asia, thousands of miles to the east, not far from where Ergen is from. Ergen is from Central Asia, on the bit north, and al-Biruni came from a city not far from Samarkand, and he was very unusual. He didn't go to his roots. So his roots were Persian, but he decided, no, I prefer Arabic. I'll give up writing in my mother tongue of Persian and write in Arabic because it's the language of science. He was very curious about nature. So what happened was that he was considered, in those days, Muslims really honored scholars and scientists. So they felt they were like an ornament of the court. And he didn't like being an ornament of the court. In fact, in his writing, he even complained that I'm a trophy scientist of this great conqueror called Mahmud of Ghazni. And Ghazni is today in Afghanistan. So Mahmud of Ghazni took him as a trophy to India. And he got very curious. He met Indian scholars. And he realized that the Indian scholars knew a lot about mathematics, but they've never heard of Euclid or Greek geometry. They'd known, obviously, some of them did know, but he didn't come across them. So he taught them Greek mathematics, but he was so intrigued by the Indians that he learned Sanskrit. And this is what I'm talking about, is that, your identity doesn't mean you should be closed to the rest of the world. Your identity can actually include the world. He was just curious. And he always was curious about people and society as well as nature. So what he did then, he wrote a very interesting book about India. It was called India. It's one of the first real ethnographies. So it's a study of a society and a culture and a thought. And it became very famous because he, for the first time, compared Greek society and Indian society. And nobody looked at that. Nobody compared two different cultures before. And then he was going back towards Central Asia, and he stopped in a place, a deep valley that overlooked a very flat plain. And he said, I think I can measure the circumference of the earth from this point. And you can actually go to that place. It's in Pakistan, where he then in the 10th century, 1,000 years ago, used the angle from the horizontal to the horizon. That angle, using Euclidean geometry, can tell you the circumference of the earth. So he just used chains, and he used very simple instruments by our standards today. And he made lots of mistakes, but they sort of canceled each other out. So he then got it right to within 25 miles. So here's a man who used only chains and a few instruments and calculated the circumference of the earth. And people said until the day he died, he was curious about life. He was really curious about anything. And my advice to you is never lose your curiosity. As I said, one novelist wrote very beautifully, the true value of knowledge is that it makes your ignorance more precise. Know what you don't know. That's the start of all knowledge. Know exactly what you don't know. That's all you need, is to know what you don't know. And that is the beginning of all knowledge, that curiosity, that openness to not knowing. Never be afraid of saying, I don't know. Never, never, ever be afraid of saying that. Now, the other two people I want to talk about talk a lot about love. And love is something that's very important. Now, Algiers didn't use these words, but he loved reason. He loved to think clearly. But there were people who felt that love is far bigger than just thinking clearly. Yes, it includes thinking clearly. And one of them was a woman called Rabia. Now, in Arabic, Rabia means four. She was the fourth daughter in the family, a very, very poor family. And she was so poor that when her parents died, her sisters could do nothing except sell her into slavery. So people think slavery is the worst possible thing. It isn't. The worst possible thing is to die starving. And when she became a slave, she at least had some food and she had shelter, but she was owned by someone. And eventually, somehow her owner saw that she had this immense spiritual force within her. And he said, I can't keep you. I have to release you. So you're no longer my slave. And then what she did was she began to realize how much she loved God. And maybe she had failed in human love, whatever it was, but she realized that the truest love is of God. But more importantly, there's a wonderful incident they talk about her. She's very famous for this. And she was walking late at night in the streets of Basra. And in the city of Basra, the policeman saw her at night and said, Rabia, what are you doing so late at night with a flaming torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other? What are you doing? And she said, I want to set fire to paradise. And I want to douse all the flames of hell so that all the flames are completely extinguished by the water. And all of paradise is burnt to the ground with my torch, so that there's nothing left but love for God. Now, what she was doing here was something very important. She was basically saying, do you want to have a relationship with God where you're just a transaction? It's simply no more than a transaction. I'll be good if you promise to take me to heaven. We're full of transactions because we feel the world is so chaotic. We don't know where to get a foothold, where to get a surety of purpose. And so we like to transact. We like to do something here for a promise from there. And she said, that's not what you do. Give yourself over. And the Muslims have this phrase, tawakkulullah, trust in God. It means give yourself over and let God's will be done. It's an ancient wisdom, and it stops this transactional approach to life and to religion. It is simply saying, I am full of love. I don't need any other reason for my faith. It is love. It is my faith. So she connected what Muslims call iman with ishq or hub. There are two different Arabic words for love. They mean something slightly different, but they both refer to love. What I'm saying is that we need to look carefully at how we negotiate through life. There are uncertainties, there's chaos. We don't know exactly how to do things, but don't get into transactions with the spirit. The spirit is the spirit. The spirit is itself. And it can work with you if you allow it to, and if you allow things to happen. And when something goes wrong, you learn. When you suffer, you endure. And when you love something, you do something about it. There you are. I just saw some message. Rabia Al-Adawiya. She's known in Malaysia. And that's a good thing, because she was a great, great soul. Now, Rabia lived over 1,200 years ago. But about 600 years ago, that is roughly 450 years after Rabia, there was another great soul who emerged in what today we call Turkey. And he was a young scholar who was very well versed in Islamic law and so on. And his name was Jalaluddin Çelebi. His formal name was Çelebi. And he became very famous many, many years after that as Jalaluddin Rumi, the one who came from Rome, which is what the Muslims called Anatolia, which was controlled by the Byzantine Christians at that time. And he grew up in a very unusual environment of multicultures, many different religions, many different faiths. And he then met someone. And this person was called Shams Tabrizi, a very strange man who appeared out of nowhere and said, you need to understand yourself. And so, Rumi was very arrogant. He was very smart. He was very learned. And he said, what do I have to learn? And there's a story, we don't know how real it was, but there's an interesting story. He just looked at Rumi's books and they caught fire. And Rumi's books were mainly about the law and about obedience and about the righteous and so on and so forth. And what happened was that his life completely changed. He dropped everything in life, and he just then spent 40 days, they say, it's a story, but it could have been true, with this man called Shams. And Shams took him deep into himself, so deep that Rumi could not even tell the difference between him and Shams. And Rumi was in a state of deep, deep love, because he suddenly realized that he is in touch with the truth. And he used a very famous phrase, Har ke talabkar khuda eid, be khud aid. So whoever is searching for God, go into yourself. And the Quran is very clear. We have come from God, to whom we shall return. So he talked a lot about the return of the soul, the longing of the drop of water to join the stream that would join the river that would then end up in the ocean. But he also said, you are not just the drop that wants to join the ocean. You are the ocean within that drop, which meant basically that he felt that we have something vast inside of us. We just need to look. And it doesn't mean you forget your responsibilities. You're a mother, Liana. You're a mother. It doesn't mean you drop your responsibilities, but you look inside and you will find an infinitude of love and knowledge. And when you are aware of who you are inside, you will realize that what you think who you are is not that important. You may be a mother, you may be a scholar, you may be a farmer, you may be from Sabah, you may be from Malaysia, you may be from Asia. Whatever it is you are, that's not the most important thing about you, because what you really are is something infinite. And you see yourself as somebody, oh, well, how can I have something infinite in me? I don't even know how to keep a plant alive, right? But that infinitude, when you touch it, will give you immense, immense joy, and you will realize that there's so much more to you than you suspect. And so Rabia, to go back to Rabia, is that she was someone who felt, don't transact, don't make transactions with nature, don't make transactions with God. Just allow yourself to feel the love. And Rumi was saying, you will love so much that you will completely forget yourself. Now, by forgetting yourself, it doesn't mean you relinquish all sense of responsibility or who you are, but rather you don't take yourself that seriously. When somebody insults you, don't take offense. You're not that important. What is important in you will never take offense because it is divine. If you feel you have failed, don't take it personally. Now, it's, many of you are from a society which has been victimized for a long time. And not one of these four people I talked about ever felt that they were victims. There were people who felt who just wanted to exercise their curiosity, like Al-Jahiz and Al-Biruni. They were just curious. And they had the self-confidence to ask questions about life. And their questions were amazing. And they provoked a lot of thought among Muslims. And the other part was knowing that you are loved. You are loved because you are love. You are nothing but love. All you need to do is just discover it. And I'm struggling myself. I'm not there. I suffer from a lot of physical pain, and I ask myself, well, why am I going through this pain? And I realize now, after many years, that I'm going through this pain because I needed to be reminded of the spirit. Because when I suffer pain, I meditate and I go inside and my pain goes down. The closer I get to God, the less my pain is. And that's the secret. It doesn't mean you don't do anything, you do things. But it just means you don't feel yourself like a victim. You don't lose your curiosity. Life is to learn from. And failure and success are in the hands of God, but you will learn through life. And every defeat is an opportunity. Look at it that way. And do not look as if you are a victim of this circumstance and that circumstance. You are the agent of your life. You will create the quality of your life. You will do it, and only you. And you do that by a complete acceptance that you are loved, that you're endowed with a natural curiosity, and you have intention. And these three things are so powerful, and you will realize their power when you go inside yourself and say, okay, who am I? Who am I really? And where does this love come from? Where does this curiosity come from? Where does this knowledge come from? It all comes from inside. These are gifts. And this is what you accept. And when you accept your gifts, you are well on your way. So what are your gifts? How will you know what your gifts are? You will find out by knowing what you love. It's so simple. And that has been one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn. As Cynthia said, I've done many things. I've been a computer animator, I've been a banker, I've been an anthropologist, and I've been an educator. I've wandered around. And what I've found now, at my age, I'm now 72 years old, I realize I'm a writer. And my biggest problem is, did I waste the last 30 years doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that? There's no place for regret. Everything you have done in life, whether you failed or succeeded, everything will teach you something. I promise you. Can we, I think I'm done. So if you have thoughts, any questions.
Thank you, Rafique. There's so much there to, I won't even say the word unpack, because how would you do that? But when we chatted, you talked a little bit about victimhood and paralysis.
Yes.
And how, in the context of decolonization and paralysis, do you want to talk a little bit about that? At that, the intersection.
Yeah, you see, I suffered physically very severely. I don't want to go into details, but I suffered severely as a teenager because I was considered too bright for my skin color. And it was horrible. My father was a very pro-Black person. He really worked very hard and took great risks to help people who were in trouble and needed help. And because they were politically, like, Jomo Kenyatta, he helped his daughter because she could, at least he gave her a job, even though it was very dangerous. Now, so my dad was well known for...
Struggle, sorry, Rafique, just to help people understand, this is during the independence struggle for Kenya in Africa that he's talking about now, just
That's
so you
it.
understand where Rafique...
And so during the independence struggle, people went to jail. And my father was a wealthy merchant. He worked he started a big company. And he said, look, this man, Jomo Kenyatta, who was arrested and condemned to many years in jail, he said, the family's lost a breadwinner, so I'll give his daughter a job. And she became a seamstress. And, he took risks like that. And then when the politicians won independence and became rich and powerful, he said, what about those who worked in the forest and had nothing to live with? They got very little out of independence. So he decided to give, somebody, one of these resistance leaders, he gave his children education because he was dead. And the day that this was announced in the papers, I got beaten very badly, very, very badly. And I still suffer from the damage that was done to me on that day. But then what is my choice in life? Do I face this and resent them? What I did was that I went to America. I received a wonderful education there and a wonderful life. And this all got buried, right? And what I did then, no grudge goes unacknowledged. It's always there. We have our grudges, we have our defeats, we have our sense of regret. And what we have to do is face them. We can't hide from them. So what I did is I went to a meditation retreat and I forgave those 4 boys who were bigger than me, who were bullies and really hurt me physically and mentally. And when I forgave them, and the way I forgave them was I said, you were on the losing side, we were on the winning side. So you had more to fear than we did. So fear was your currency. You used fear against me, but you're more afraid than I was. So you can, then what happens when you forgive somebody, when you forgive a situation, then what? It gives you agency. It gives you a kind of strength that you find difficult. And so what I'm saying is never, never feel a victim. Do not feel a victim. There's another danger about being a victim, and that is that you can literally be blind to your own the harm you might do to people. Yes, these were white racist kids. You're right. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments. The kids who beat me up were white racists. Okay. And there were very nice white people as well, but these were really nasty racists because they had so much to fear. So anyway, what I'm saying is you have to let go, because you have to realize you are the agent of your life. You are the agent. You will create your own life. And if you blame other people, blame everything outside of you, you're not going to get very far. You get far when you can take your life into your own hands and say, yes, I will create the life I wish. I will create the life I wish. I will create the life I wish. That is your motto. Stay with that, and you will create the life you wish. It will happen, not in the way you expect, not when you expect, not how you expect, but it will happen.
Okay, so I'm guessing people have burning questions or comments or anything at all. You can see in the chat, everyone wants your audiobook already, Rafique.
I'll do it one day. God bless you. At least I know some people are interested.
Anyone? Any offerings from our circle here?
There is none. Can I start?
Hi,
Okay.
please.
Thank you very much for the very, very enlightening. There are so many questions I would like to ask, but I just want to ask one just for clarification. Yeah. See, you did mention that we can learn from nature. You show it through Al-Jahis and so forth. See, in the when I developed the green philosophy, one of the things I encourage people is to use nature as the teacher, moving away from an anthropocentric worldview to an ecocentric worldview. Now, the question that troubles me now is, what is the nature that we are trying to engage with? So when I read books on eco-critics, in the Western world, there is such thing as nature interpreted by the poets as pastoral, something they lost and they like to go back to in a way like nostalgic. Oh, nature is a wilderness. But then science says nature is a dead object. But if you go to Gaia, you said nature is a living organism. So when you talk about we are learning from nature, what is that nature that you're talking about? If you can clarify a bit, thank you very much.
Oh, wow. You're asking a very big question, my friend. You see, the first point I would like to make is that we are nature. That is, our consciousness and our bodies, especially our bodies, have come from nature. All the elements in our body were from Earth. So we can't be separate, right? That's the first principle. The second principle is that, you know, nature, we're constantly interacting with nature. And you just need to understand certain things about nature. For example, nature is not it's a system. From a scientific point of view, you cannot look at nature as one thing. There's no one solution to nature, your relationship to nature. You have to look at things in a systematic way. There are things that are related to other things, and other things are related to yet other things. And you need to be conscious of the possibility of, you know, of the implications of what you do in nature. You know, that's what we would call your elementary responsibility of knowledge. Know what you're doing. Don't pretend nature is passive. Nature is implicated in everything we do. The third point that occurs to me is that I don't know how to put it. It's very subtle. It sounds, but there is a consciousness. There's a consciousness in plants. There's a consciousness in animals. There's a consciousness even in rocks. What is this consciousness? What does it do to us? What is our relationship to that? We should at least be aware of that question. I don't know the answers, but I'm convinced that Gaia is something, is alive. There is a giant system of life, and life may change. Most species on Earth have been extinct. Most species that ever occurred on Earth are dead. But look at life. There's such a profusion of life. So there's change in nature. And we can't predict this change. It is somewhat chaotic. But what we need to do is just to realize that we are, in a way, anyone who feels for nature is the voice of nature. Now, what does it mean when you feel that you are expressing or realizing or understanding or questioning something that is as deep as nature, and that you are part of it? It's almost like saying, okay, who am I? What is my nature? And what do I share with all of nature? We don't have clear answers to this, but I think these are questions worth asking. You know, we can't ignore these questions. We can't say, I will look at nature. You don't look at nature. You're nature looking at nature. You are part of nature. Your voice, your conscience, you know. I remember the first moment I realized that I would one day be a, you know, sort of an ecologically oriented anthropologist. It was such a simple idea. It was when I was at, you know, first year of biology. And the teacher said, well, plants produce take carbon dioxide and produce oxygen, and animals, you know, take oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. And I thought, oh my God, what an amazing thing, the give and take. It was such a simple idea, but it really affected me all my life. I was always conscious, you know. So I remember I was in London on my way to America in 1967 in August. And I think on the 5th of August, I can't remember exactly, but Denmark decided to shift from driving on the left to driving on the right. So that night, pollution dropped very dramatically in Copenhagen. And from that point on, I realized I do not want to get a car that emits this gas. Do you see what I mean? There are certain things that when you're alert to something deeper, you're alert to these facts. They tell you a lot. So in your life, you will find yourself encountering facts that will really help you understand nature. I just wish I could be more specific than that, but that's how I feel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your wonderful question.
I think that's very specific. Anyone, any other offerings, any other gems of questions? Can we hear some voices? I think everyone's a little bit stunned, Rafique.
Okay, it doesn't matter. You know what it is? You know, each flower opens in its own time. So discussion now may lead to a thought 20 years from now. You just don't know.
So in the absence of anyone else, Rafique, let me ask you something. You've talked about, you know, you gave these examples of these different historic figures in their time, but you also showed how they did not allow themselves to be prisoners of their time, nor did they allow themselves to be prisoners of their own personal families, their own family histories. I mean, two of them were slaves. But at the same time, we can feel, listening to you, that you have tremendous respect for history. You don't say that we should forget history. We should forget the stories of these people or the stories of these empires that rose and fell and in the ways that they did. So help us to understand why and how we can know history, value history, understand all those contexts, but also not be prisoners of it, not define ourselves only by that. You know, if we imprison in our own histories, well, we can always list a long list of people who oppressed us and did us wrong that we've got to get revenge
Exactly.
on, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Even
Well,
the English
you see
list of people they need revenge.
Well, the thing is that what is your interest in history? Is it to justify yourself? Is it to somehow find confirmation for some of your deepest prejudices? Is it to justify hating someone, or is it to learn about yourself? And my feeling is that history, we need to look to the past, but only in that it will help us understand ourselves and not justify this or that oppression, because we can be as nasty as anyone else. We can become victims, and victims can be very, very nasty. You can completely forget that you can also create victims of yourself. So the attitude to history should be, well, what do we learn from the past, so that we become agents of our own life, and we don't carry bitterness, we don't carry regret, we don't carry a sense of grievance. There's enough evil has been done in the world in the past, but that doesn't mean we don't have reason for hope. And where do we find this hope? This hope can simply be in our desire for agency. We just want to make better choices in life. We don't want to harm people. We want to create something. We want to make the world a better place. Then history is very good to help us understand this, because there have been a lot of mistakes in the past, but there have also been great people who have reminded us of the possibility of greatness in human beings. So we can get inspired by history. We can move forward, but not carry bitterness and not carry victimhood. It's very easy to fall into victimhood, especially when you have suffered. And I come from a community that suffered immensely for 1,000 years. But we don't, we were taught by our leaders, do not carry your burden of victimhood. Don't take it with you. Drop it. You need to understand the world. You need to understand its dangers, but you also have to create a better world. You have to look forward. You have to find the best in humanity to carry forward. And history helps you there as well. There are examples of amazing people. And you look at the example and you say, my God, why can't I do this? That's how I look at history. I don't look at history. I'm quite aware of how dangerous and damaging things have, people have been in the past, but that's fine. There's also goodness. As some Sufi said, if you choose, you can be higher than everything on earth. If you choose, you can be lower than everything on earth. It's your choice. So go for the height. Go for the people who inspire you, who really get you excited about the possibilities of human action, creative action. And remember, keep in mind that you have to leave the world a better place than you found it. That's all.